What up, guys? This is Luke from SoberFromTheSpear.com. It is March 13th, 2013 at 3:27 a.m. Doing a video blog tonight. Gonna be kind of a rant style again. Kind of pissed off about weed and why it's legal in Colorado. Always get into discussions with people, and there seems to be a lack of knowledge on their behalf and like some ignorance, and they kind of say shit that pisses me off. Alright, so here we go. Weed should be illegal. That's my personal opinion. A lot of people talk to me, like the other day, for example, I was at work and I just quit my job. Had to quit it because I gotta end up getting a addiction counseling license, work at a detox, all this shit in order to make this non-profit portion of the company work out. So I put in my 2 weeks, and I was talking with this guy. He's a server with me. I worked at a restaurant, and he was asking me why I quit. I was telling him why, telling him about my recovery and what I want to do with this company and stuff. He's like, why don't you just smoke weed? Weed's not addictive. Like, why don't you just get high on that? Like, fuck that. I'm like, weed's totally addictive, is what I told him. He's like, no, it's not, dude. I've been smoking weed since I was 15. And I'm not addicted to it. I was like, well, like, how old are you? He's like, well, I'm 28. In my head, I'm like, motherfucker, you've been smoking weed for 13 years now, and you're saying you're not addicted? Like, you are psychotic. That's crazy. That's insane. And he's like, well, every time I quit, like, I don't go through withdrawals. It's mentally addictive, but it's not physically addictive. Weed is physically addictive, though. Ask any motherfucker who's been smoking weed for a long time, ending up getting physically addicted to it, and then they try to quit. I've been there. I have friends that are still there, and when you try to quit, you end up getting depressed. You have mood swings, you don't feel right, you feel like shit, you end up being a dick, being an asshole, all this stuff, and all of that is related to the withdrawals that you're going through from trying to come off of weed. A lot of people don't associate those with the withdrawals, but those are the weed withdrawals. The reason that weed withdrawals are different from alcohol withdrawals or from benzodiazepines or barbiturates or cocaine, meth, any other type of drug, is that weed is not soluble in water. So it has a long half-life. A half-life is basically how long the drug stays active in your body until your body fully metabolizes it and gets it out of your system using your liver, and you piss it out and shit. Well, weed isn't soluble in water like alcohol, benzodiazepine, barbiturates, all of those. It's not soluble in water, so it doesn't get stored in your bloodstream. It gets stored in your fat. It's soluble in fat. So it lasts in your body for a really long time. That's the reason why barbiturates are the worst type of drug to withdraw off of. Then right afterwards is benzodiazepines. Then right after that is alcohol. Those are the three like deadly ones that when you withdraw off of them, you can seize up and die and like have all this crazy shit happen to you. That's because it's not soluble in your fat, it's soluble in your blood, it's soluble in water, and when you quit using it, it comes out of your body really quickly, so the withdrawals happen now. And all of a sudden, like, your body goes into like shock. That's basically what a withdrawal is your brain, your body going into shock from not having the substance anymore, fucking with everything in your brain. So weed, it's in your fat for a really long time, which is really scary because the two most fatty places on your body are your brain and, if you're a guy, your testicles. Those are like the two most fatty places on your body. So when I was on methadone, for example, or when I was smoking a lot of weed, methadone is also another drug that's pretty soluble in fat. And so it has a really long half-life. And coming off of it, the withdrawals lasted for a really long time. And the withdrawals off methadone are more hardcore because it's a different type of drug. But ended up like withdrawing from that for like 6 months to a year. In some cases, it takes people like a year and a half to even withdraw if they go cold turkey. and that's why a lot of people go on like Suboxone, which has buprenorphine in it, and buprenorphine is another synthetic opiate, kind of like methadone, but Suboxone's safer because you can't really get high on it if you're using it right. However, buprenorphine, like, it stays in your fat too, and it like takes a long time to get out of your system. And so when I was on those substances, the withdrawals were shitty, and they were stored in my nuts and in my brain. And your nuts, like if you're a guy, like things that your testicles produce is testosterone. I was losing testosterone from having all these drugs in my genitals, and so I was losing body hair. I was losing sex drive, like all this stuff, losing my drive in life, like all the things that make a man gets fucked up when you have a drug being stored in your nuts and fucking with your testosterone. That lowers your levels. I was having man titties because of all the estrogen and shit that was going on in my body from not having testosterone, like all this stuff. And then the really scary thing is all that was being stored in my brain. Same thing with weed. If you see somebody that smokes weed all the time and like has been doing it for a really long time, if they're a guy, they're gonna have man titties, they're gonna like have a lot more fat, they're gonna like be losing hair on their legs, possibly have weird facial hair or whatever it is. Like, depends on the person. It's subjective, I guess. But their testosterone levels are significantly reduced, and that's going to affect the way their development in their body goes. And when it's in your brain, that's when it's really scary, because that shit's in your brain. Like, you might not be high from it anymore. Like, you might not be feeling high from it. However, the THC, cannabinoids, or the methadone, like what I was on, or the buprenorphine, or whatever it is, that shit's stored in your brain, and that's fucking with your brain processes. What's really scary about weed, and you can watch, like they've done studies on this, they use it on chimpanzees and monkeys because they couldn't do this particular study on a person because it's unethical. But they would give this, like this monkey or whatever, they would give it THC and all these cannabinoids for a really long period of time. And after a while of having all these cannabinoids and THC in their brain, it would start crystallizing around their brain cells. And it would crystallize around like the synapses and stuff. And that's what receives like brain signals. That's what receives like what neurons or whatever processing, like making your brain do shit, whether it's breathing, thinking right, moving your hands right, whatever it is, motor functions, all that shit goes on in your brain. And so when this stuff crystallizes, they found with weed that they have no idea if the crystallization process will ever like go away. Once the crystal is there, all they found was that the crystal stays there in these monkeys. And so this monkey has a brain now that's functioning with a lot of its brain cells having crystals over them, preventing any signal from coming in. That's scary. That's going to slow down your thinking process. That's going to slow down all this shit. And that's long after the monkey stopped using weed and had it metabolized out of its body. Wasn't pissing, like, they couldn't find its piss anymore and find weed in it. Like, this is way after the monkey quit using weed. And they have no idea how long that crystal will be in your brain. So that could be the rest of your life, is what some evidence is showing. That's fucking scary, especially if you're in recovery and trying to get sober. One thing I've noticed with recovery is my brain, like the things that I do every day, whether it be meditation, proper diet, all this stuff, all that affects how my brain works. It affects my mood. It affects how well I can recall information, all these things. And all of those things enable me to make the right decisions towards recovery, make the right decisions towards setting up the principles of boundaries, or being honest, all this stuff, feeling good. Like, if I feel good, I'm not going to really want to use, but when I feel shitty, like, I want to use. All that has to do with, like, the stuff that I'm eating, the stuff that I'm doing, every action I take in my life. And if I have a bunch of weed crystals in my head, like, fucking with all that and, like, not letting my brain register things correctly, that's going to screw up my attempts at recovery. That's going to screw up, like, my thinking process in life in general. I don't know if you've ever seen, but they call people, like, burnouts. And you see these people that, like, did so many drugs that they're just like, their brain is fucked, and when they become sober, they're like burnt the fuck out on life. That's gonna happen with weed. Weed is addictive, and the only reason that the withdrawals aren't really palpable, like the only reason why they don't feel as hardcore as the other shit, is because weed stays in your system for such a long time because it's so soluble in your fat. And I just gave you all the reasons why it's really bad for it to be soluble in your fat. So even though you're not feeling the withdrawals like I felt with methadone, or like I felt with all the other drugs that I came off of, like all the opiates, like the opiate withdrawals are crazy. Like I literally shat my pants one time. Snotty nose, like aching bones, like the craziness that was going in my head, like the anxiety and depression and like just all the crazy shit that was going on. Even though you're not feeling that from the weed, you are going through withdrawals from the weed because it's stored in your fat. It's almost scarier that it's stored in your fat because it could be in your head for a really long time. It's going to fuck with your hormone levels. It's going to fuck with your testosterone if you're a guy. Like, it's going to screw with all that shit. And all that shit adds up to, like, every action you take in your life. You see people with roid rage or whatever, like, really high testosterone guys, and they're all, like, being a man and, like, doing all this shit in life. It all has to do with their testosterone. Their muscle build up, everything has to do with your testosterone. So if your testosterone's being reduced by weed, that's fucking scary. Not to mention, like, weed's just not a good drug, you know? Like, I believe every drug has its place in the medical field. I mean, even cocaine. Cocaine's used to make Novocaine and lidocaine. That's all derivatives from cocaine. Like, my family member has MS or whatever. His MS, like, could end up giving him spasms or whatever, and if it got really bad, if he ever had to come to it, which a lot of people that have MS end up getting a medical marijuana card, and they use that because it helps with the spasms that go on in their brain. That's a place where weed, I guess, could be acceptable, or people that are in AIDS wasting or all that shit. Like, every drug has its purpose in the medical field. All the methadone and like crazy shit that I was on for opiates and stuff, like that all definitely has its place in surgery. Alcohol used to be used as an anesthetic. Fucking benzodiazepines, barbiturates. Those are used to treat like anxiety and even seizures and shit. All those have their place. However, they all have a bunch of like potential dangers, and if you're using it to get high, then you got to worry about the addiction that comes, which I've already mentioned in previous blogs, talking about how when you're an addict, the disease affects your limbic system and your fucking prefrontal cortex and everything. So you got to worry about all that shit, and then on top of it, there's all these other side effects with withdrawal and all this stuff that can happen. And then if you're doing weed, you got to worry about that shit being stored in your fat, man, and like stuck in your nuts and in your head. Like, those are the two places that make me who I am. That makes me a dude, and that makes me, like, capable of doing shit in life. Makes me be able to breathe and everything. If I don't have a brain, like, I can't fucking function. So, making this video blog because these are all things I want to tell people when I talk with them about weed, or when they try to tell me to, like, smoke weed or something, or when this election just happened in Colorado and weed's now illegal. Like, these are all things I want to say, but I think everything has its time and place, and this is the time and place for me to say this stuff, because a lot of people really won't register this. And if you don't think that I'm telling the truth, like, go look it up. Go get some research somewhere, see the studies, and, like, figure out what's really going on, figure out what you find to be accurate. Everything that I've researched and everything that I've looked up and learned in rehabs, in medical facilities where they teach this stuff, online, personal research, all this shit is in relation to the stuff that I'm saying right now. Also, a new thing with studies that are going on right now, they're really new studies, but they're showing that the high levels of THC that are in the new weed that's coming out, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, the weed hasn't changed since the 70s and all this stuff. Give me a fucking break, dude. Weed has changed since I was in high school, which was fucking 6 years ago. Like, in Colorado, there's crazy ass weed, and it's a lot different from the weed that I was smoking back then. Like, I know I was on a high school, like, income, and I was coming from a small town. However, like, the stuff you could find in Woodland Park now, like, the stuff that I was finding after I got out of high school, like, that shit was pretty insane. And it had a lot higher content of THC than the stuff I was smoking before that. Anyways, these new levels of high THC and stuff they're finding is almost like catalyzing people's mental disorders in relation to like schizophrenia, stuff like that. Like, it's not causing people to have schizophrenia, but schizophrenia is like a disease that'll run in your genes, like in your family. Like, you have family members that have it, like, your brain is more susceptible to having it. And if you're one of these people that has that in their bloodline, and like your brain is already like teetering on the edge of maybe developing schizophrenia, but you don't have it yet, new studies are showing that this crazy weed that's out there, when people are smoking it, it's fucking with their brain to where they develop schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a disease. Like, once you have it, it's like addiction. There's no going back. You always have that. Like, once you get schizophrenia, you have schizophrenia. Most of the time people are born with it, but they're finding that shit like weed, the new weed that's out there and stuff that people are using every day to get high, and stuff that's legal now in Colorado for you to like smoke by yourself and have all this crazy shit. It's tipping those people off into these schizophrenic like disorders and shit. That's fucking scary. I would never want to have to deal with that. Never want to have to deal with like the crazy delusional thoughts and all this fucked up shit that can happen with that. That's another reason that weed should not be legal. Do I think alcohol should be legal? Fuck no, I don't. Do I think any drug should be legal to use? Like, no. Do I think they should be decriminalized and there should be more focus on rehabilitation, getting people's whole brain fixed because this is a disease? Fuck yeah, I do, because I'm an addict and I know exactly what it's like going through all that. I don't think throwing somebody in jail and not actually rehabilitating them and using the processes it takes to become in recovery and like actually live like a worthwhile life, I think those should be taught, not just throwing you in jail and like locking you away. But I don't think that gives right for that shit to be legal for everybody to use when not many people know about this stuff and not many people take the time to research this stuff and really learn what's going on. And even when they do research it, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that'll probably see this video and be like, oh, that kid's full of shit. It's fucking full of shit. I'm not making this for you people if you're arguing with me, though. I'm making this because this is my blog. This is the stuff that I found. This is the stuff that I want to bring up to people. This is stuff that a lot of evidence is pointing towards. So this, to me, is my paradigm. This is fucking the way it is in Luke's head. This is true, all right? Fucking true. So you can't even argue with me on it because I have the evidence to back it up. It's not just faith. It's not blind faith. It's real. So it's like 3:46 now, and I'm going to sign off. Hope you guys enjoyed my video. I hope you learned something from it. I hope it, like, at least inspired you to go do some research yourself and take from it what you will. I know there's also a lot of people out there that are smoking weed and like are able to do fine with it. There's also a lot of people out there that are able to drink and do fine with that. I, however, am not one of those people, and when somebody says that it's not addictive or it doesn't cause any problems, these are the problems it can cause. These are the things that shows that it is addictive. You do go through withdrawals on it. It is physically addictive. The withdrawals are different, however, because of the half-life to it, because it's not soluble in water. This is my rebuttal to that sort of argument. However, if you're not an addict, like, you don't even have a problem with quitting it when you don't want to, or when you want to. You don't have a problem quitting the weed when you want to because you're not an addict. However, if you're like me, like, you can't stop it until you get help and you're in recovery. So, yeah. Thanks for watching this. You guys have a good night. Peace out. We'll see you next week, or hopefully later on this week even. Looking for a job right now, so I got plenty of time to do video blogs. Alright. Later.